The digital art era is here. AI and art creation tools empower anyone to make it. Blockchain technologies allow anyone to own it. VR, AR, and extended reality immerse us in it. Let's talk to artists and innovators behind the visual magic. I'm your host, Roger Dickerman. Welcome to the future of art. Today, we welcome J.N. Silva. J.N. is a Renaissance man, artist, photographer, blockchain advocate, community thought leader. They're a good start, but the whole is far greater than the sum of his parts. He is the founder of Animus, an artist collective dedicated to advancing the future, and he is the executive producer of Buscando America, a film being constructed through Web3. One of my favorite people in Web3 and the world for that matter. Let's get to it. J.N. Silva, welcome to the future of art.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
You know, it's funny to think back, man, when we were doing Origin Stories interviews, you came on with Thank You X, but there was never a solo J.N. Silva episode. And as I was thinking about that today, it blew my mind.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, I find it just amazing that I had kind of like a partner in crime to enter the space with. And, you know, a bunch of, I bet a lot of, you know, all of our first interviews were together. So we kind of were able to like riff with each other and support each other. So we didn't have to go through kind of like the scary part of entering a brand new space all alone. So I'm always very grateful for that. But yeah, never a solo origin story on me.
Well, now we get to do it in a different context, but still talk obviously about art and its future. So it's good topical fodder for us.
For sure. And so much has changed since then, right? That was what, 2020, early 2021, the origin story. And it feels like it's been a decade plus since. So definitely have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I think time and place for that, we can get more into it in a bit, but time and place for that was right smack between Thank You New York and Thank You Miami. Because I remember talking about, I think we were teasing, or I think you could share a little bit about what was coming, if I remember correctly. I have to go back to that episode.
That's correct. Yeah, I think we were teasing Thank You Miami at that point.
Yeah. So Jay and Silva, I'm going to ask you the toughest question of the day first. So gear yourself up. What does art mean to you?
Oof. Okay. Art to me is the way that humans kind of transcend this tangible reality and connect to the universal consciousness, the energy of the universe, right? Is the way that we can fully express the full breadth of our emotions and feelings and, you know, creativity and everything that we contain inside, right? Like we contain multitudes. And I think the only way to really express that and turn it into something more tangible and you know, something that can be experienced is through art. I think that's it for me.
I didn't even send you that question beforehand, but I feel like you were spot on with that.
Thank you. I mean, I think about it a lot, honestly, and especially lately. I've been really thinking through what art means to me. And, you know, for me, it's just, I feel like I have so many thoughts and emotions and things that I have inside. And, you know, the only way that it feels right to get those out for me is through art.
I've called you a Renaissance man before, and I find it so fascinating how you move through, whether we call it, like loosely speaking, the digital art space, outside of that, but we could go to philosophy, we could go to photography, we could go to Animus, we could go to Arbitrum, we could go to Fractals, we could go to your collaboration with Thank You X, we go to so many different things, and you encompass them all. How does it feel being a Renaissance man?
Oh man, it's something that I work through every day. I wouldn't, you know, knowing the extent of knowledge that actual Renaissance men had, for me, it's always been just mind blowing, right? These were people who were experts in mathematics and science, who knew Latin, who knew multiple languages, studied, you know, the classical works going back thousands of years, you know, and I think about that all the time. And I remember when I studied about them in college and, you know, kind of just got to that era and, you know, the Enlightenment. And I was just like in awe. And I was like, oh, that was the first time where I was like, well, this is kind of like paradoxical because I'm here in school studying a very specific subset of subjects and subject matter, right? Which for me was, I was very lucky because it was philosophy and it was history and there was literature. And I feel like those three kind of, played off each other really well. But when I learned of all of these, incredible thinkers who changed the world, I was like, that's what I want to be. I just want to be as well-rounded as possible. I think people misconstrue the Shakespeare quote, and it's like, the master of no, what is it? Jack of all trades, master of none. But then the second half of that quote actually speaks to how it's better to be a jack of all trades and it's more resourceful, and everyone kind of just leaves that second part of the quote out. And to me, since then, it's just been kind of like a goal to just always be curious, always stay learning. And I have like a deep curiosity, and thankfully I've always been really good at just being online and the internet and reading. And it's one of those things where I find something out, I get interested in it, and I'm like, okay, I need to go deeper into this, and I need to go deeper into this, and I just kind of just keep prodding until I feel like, okay, I'm sufficiently learned on this topic, and then I kind of move on to the next one. And I feel like I've had different eras where I just get really into a new practice, or a new form of art, or a new hobby, or a new trade. And I've been just kind of living my life going from interest to interest. So by now I'm grateful, I just try to be really well-rounded, honestly. And it pays off because I feel like the more well-rounded you are and the more you can know and experience across different, subject matter, the better the connections you can make between them all. And everything just starts, you can borrow from one thing and then put in another. And I think those connections is where like true intelligence really lies. It's just making, connections between things that people might not connect otherwise.
I think it's so fascinating. Go back to the Shakespeare quote too. It is misquoted all the time, and it's interesting to consider the other side, that being a generalist of sorts and knowing a lot about knowing some about a lot of things could be a superpower in some regards. Bring that into the art sphere, because I think it's a popular topic of debate sometimes, where people say something like, oh, you have to have a quote unquote style to succeed. You have to go all in on that style over and over again so people understand what to expect, or they're able to storytell or contextualize it themselves. Versus the other side of that is a superpower to, I don't know how you described it before was perfect, but the connective tissue between things and having multiple frameworks of experience. But how do you think about it relative to your art career?
Yeah, so for me, it's something that I honestly think about it all the time. And I always see it, especially just browsing social media, and especially on Twitter, and the art critics and collectors. And they're always just very much, oh, you should be able to see and determine an artist immediately by the piece, right? And you see this all the time, or the concept of a niche, and the artists have their niche. And for me, honestly, I feel like if I get caught into that mindset or that frame of thinking, then I'm immediately not making art for myself. I'm immediately making art for someone else. And again, I'm into so many different things and so many different styles, right? Like I love photography. And when I do photography, even within photography, I love doing documentary photography. I love doing portraiture. I love doing aerial photography. I love doing music, right? And if I were to constrain myself to just one niche and one aspect and then just stuck to it, yes, I would probably be very, very good at that. But then I feel like I would be missing out on the full breadth of experience that is just, being an observer of the world, and then someone that documents the world. And that's just within photography. But, when I step outside of that, I got very much into, fractals and making fractals. And within that, that's like a whole totally different style that is, it's so abstract and conceptual that it's totally different from my photography work. And I would feel like I would be shutting off a part of myself if I wasn't making that. So for me, I'm always just like very aware of like, I'm making art just for me, just again, to get the stuff that I have inside and the feelings that I have and the thoughts that I have and the interests that I have, to project them out from inside my mind into the physical. And I'm not thinking about anyone else when I make them. So, I just really like to explore different mediums and again, make these connections, because then, I can get the fractals and then project them over a person and then take a photo, and I'm kind of blending those two interests. And then I can do a video and then add some music that I made, and I'm combining three interests. So for me, it's all, again, about expressing myself and kind of like the full spectrum of my interest. And I'm not really worried about, oh, a Jay and Silva piece has to look like this, right? And I feel like for me, what really, the thread that runs through all of my work is more so, the intention behind it, and kind of like the concept and the meaning. And it's always very much rooted in philosophy and spirituality and mindfulness. And, I feel like if you have that, that's my theme that runs through it, but that theme manifests itself in many different ways and shapes and forms.
So if you fast forward, and we've been here, I mean, the framework for our conversation, we really started to get to know each other, roughly speaking, 2.5 years ago, right? A little bit more than that.
Mhm.
And a lot of our frameworks of experience exist in this time. And I know you've obviously done a lot before that. You had a thriving art career, photography, like you name it, you were doing it. But I think a lot of, again, people that are interacting in quote unquote the space now, the digital art space, which obviously is tied to a marketplace, a lot of people are interacting on those 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 years for those who've been around a long time. Reflect on those years and the number of things that you've explored, and how do you envision your quote unquote the space legacy panning out 10, 20, 50 years from now?
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's been an insane ride, honestly, right? And again, it's been just 3 years, a little bit over 3 years since I actively started minting. I've obviously been in space as an observer and a learner for way before that. But as far as accomplishments and the things I've done, if I were to retroactively look or project myself into the future, retroactively think about my legacy, for sure, I feel like what most people will know me for is just how many people I onboarded into the space. I feel like they know me more for that than my actual art, which I'm totally okay with. And, I feel like my biggest impact was just the sheer number and quality of people that I was able to onboard into Web3, and then in one way or another, help navigate the space. And that's largely what Animus was built for, is just to help artists kind of like navigate this new medium. And artistically, I hope, I actually don't think about it too much, because again, I'm like, I make the art for me, and then once it's made, that's like, I did it. That's my accomplishment. Once I put it out, it's okay. You can like it, you cannot like it. That's fine with me. A lot of the times I put stuff out there and nothing happens, and I'm totally fine with it. But I hope people realize that, I fully gave it my all at every time, and every piece of art that I made was very genuine, that I never forced any art. That I'm very big on that, especially anything that I mint. I feel like I do my very best to never mint anything that I'm not just genuinely passionate about. And I hope people know that I just acted to the highest moral and ethical standards that I can conceive. And I think that's it. If they can get that from my legacy, then I'll be totally fine with it. And of course, I'm in my mind, I haven't even begun to peak, right? Like I have so many ideas. I'm always learning so much. And, for me, it's always like, okay, how can I take this to the next level? And even if that takes me, I have a very long-term mindset, so even though I was one of the earliest people to mint and be in the space, I'm probably the one that has minted the least for in that amount of time, right? But it's because like I'm fine not minting much over a two-year time span, because I know I'm thinking for the 10-year, right? And whatever comes in those 10 years, so that's what I'm like really working towards. And so it may take me a little longer to get there, but I'm working at it every day.
Stay with the topic of growth, and specifically growth of self versus growth that you are influencing. Growth of digital art, growth of the space, as it were. You spend a lot of time doing exactly what you just said, onboarding other people, helping other people, holding their hand from wallet setup to, to things far beyond that. How do you reconcile that? You're doing incredible things. You get probably not enough accolades for it, because you do it so humbly and quietly. But how do you reflect on that energy transfer? Giving of yourself to others for growth purposes versus giving to yourself for growth purposes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to certain philosophies, and it's like, what is the greatest good? And the greatest good is what is the greatest good for the largest amount of people. I forgot who it was. That might have been John Stuart Mill. Don't quote me. But I think about that all the time, right? And it's like, sure, I could have gone kind of like the selfish route and just like kept that to myself and just worked on my own pieces and held all of this information that I had. But just like, that's inherently just not me, right? And for me, like I've always learned the best way to learn is by teaching, right? So it's almost, as I onboarded all these people and as I helped them out, I was also learning a ton about the space. And I just have this need or desire to just kind of like help people out, because I know that, in a very small selfish way, that it also helps me out. And I just really truly believe in like the concept of reciprocity, right? And that most humans have this like innate thing where, if you help them, they feel like this need is, oh, I need to somehow pay this back eventually, right? And again, it's not everybody, but throughout my career, I've had people who just were very selfless and helped me when I was starting, people that changed my life. And, I always felt like, oh, I have to, if I don't help them back, then I have to at least pay it forward. So for me, I'm always just kind of like paying it forward and hope that whoever I help pays it forward, and we create some sort of network effect where everyone's kind of just helping each other. It's not, I'm very much an idealist in this scenario, and it doesn't always happen. But, for me, I'm also a huge believer of karma, and I'm like, well, I'm just really farming a lot of good karma. And even if they don't pay me back in one way or another, I feel like that energy will come back to me, and eventually everyone gets what they deserve. And I just put out the good energy and hope that it finds its way back to me eventually.
You're one of my favorite examples of something that I've talked a lot about recently. As bear market, whatever terminology you want to use. It's obviously been a little bit of a rougher time across, let's say, cryptocurrency, across the art space. However, there are folks out there who are creating and encouraging their own realities, right? That they're not, call it, a victim to circumstances. That's what you hear a lot of in those moments. Oh man, it feels bad. This is happening. Why this, why that? You do hear a lot of that. I think it's human nature. It's not faulting anyone for behaving that way. But you also see, and I've mentioned the Patrick Amadons in the world a lot. He was episode 2 of the show. Alpha Centauri Kid was episode 6. He's another one. But you do hear those shining voices out there who are having tough dialogues, speaking very convictedly, acting as a guiding light, in a sense, crafting or growing the future that they want to see, and playing a role in that. I feel like you belong absolutely in that group of people. Do you view that as a responsibility?
Thank you. First of all, what a group of people, and I'm a huge fan of Patrick and a lot of the people, kind of who show up every day, because, honestly, it's not easy. Like, if first of all, it's been 3 years now for a lot of us, and the space just always moves so fast that, if you miss 1 or 2 weeks, you kind of miss the current narrative and you don't know what's happening. And of course, it's totally fine to disconnect. But I'm always kind of just like in tune, right? I wrote this tweet the other day and I was like, I'm here. I check the timeline every day. I scroll every day. Sometimes I don't respond. I may not be tweeting every day, but I'm up to date with everything that's happening. And behind the scenes, I'm always working, just because I have so much conviction in the long term. But for sure, after having such an explosive hype cycle and all of this like overwhelming amounts of positivity that we had in 2021, and all the artists really supporting each other and being there for each other, and the wag me mentality, which I was never kind of a part of, to go from that to everything that happened last year with all the dominoes falling and Luna and FTX and all of the hits that the space took, to this year with the regulatory stuff and kind of just the whole PFP mania and all the founders who are doing all these crazy things, and kind of the conversation has shifted. And usually a lot of the times the bad actors are, for better or worse, the loudest people. And if you're only paying attention to them, it can kind of consume you. And I know a lot of artists who are just like got consumed by just following the wrong people and engaging with the wrong people and giving them too much attention, which is what they feed on. So for me, I kind of continue to do my work in the background. I continue to focus again on my self-growth and kind of like my piece and my art, while helping kind of like, orchestrate as many goodwill things I can in the background, whether that's like doing, the Animus space every week, right? Like it's a very small thing and we don't get a ton of listeners, but within those listeners, we always get the comments like, wow, this is the best space, really great vibes in this space, right? It feels really good to be here amongst artists and people who like, are kind of thinking through the right things instead of focusing on all of the mess that's going on in the space. So for me, I kind of, tune out the bad and I just don't engage with it. It's always going to be there. There's always going to be bad apples. But at the end of the day, the technology is getting better and better. Every day there's new things that I'm seeing, the new token standards. You have people like Transient Labs and Manifold who are just like doing so much for artists, and Sotheby's and Christie's are still doing a great job, kind of like bridging the traditional art world to what we're doing here. You have artists like, of course, I got to shout out Thank You X, who, like, he just sent a painting of his up into space. He had a painting that went up to space and now it's coming back and it's getting auctioned at Sotheby's. Like, that's incredible. So there is a lot of good still going on. I think it's just kind of like, again, sometimes the loudest people don't have the best intentions. So, if I can be kind of just like a quieter voice in the background, just, helping and teaching and doing what I can, to make sure that this continues, that we progress in the long term, then, I'm with it. I don't see it as a responsibility, just because, again, if it ever gets to be too much, and there are times where I'm like, okay, I need to take a step back and maybe not be on social media as much, I'll do that with no guilt. I feel like I have periods of kind of just like, I'll rest and take a break, and then I'll learn a bunch of stuff because, I can't be on here just tweeting everything if I'm not learning. And then I'll come in and I'll just be like super active for a while. And I'm just like, well, here's everything I learned. And then I'm like, okay, I need to take a step back again. And it's just like this cycle that, consciously or unconsciously, I kind of just go through.
Go back to something you said. You talked about consumption, and specifically some people maybe consuming the wrong things or the wrong voices and becoming really fatigued by that or disillusioned by that. That's a real thing. It's a real thing on social media, the social media algorithms. I mean, both within this space and far outside of it, in a lot of different arenas, this is a reality. What I find to be such an interesting phenomena is when things turn negative for a period of time, driven by market conditions or what have you, and those voices perk up. Sort of the more influencer-centric voices perk up, and they take advantage of those moments. Those moments are, quite frankly, great for engagement if you're willing to use them. What you start to see is a lot of people, a lot of really good people with a lot of good things to say. Their content starts to be derivative, meaning they're saying, no, not that, this, but they're always prefacing it with a lead-in to what that circulating negative was. I find that so fascinating. So, it's really trying to say, like, I want to hear just what you have to say. Yeah. I don't want to hear the reference to the loudest voices in the room. I just want to hear what you have to say. I think that's such an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, no, it really is fascinating. And I see it all the time, and with people that I admire too, and friends, and they'll get into these back and forth debates, and they'll take the bait, right, from these negative, yielding influencers, and they'll take the bait and be like, well, no, like someone has to fight. And I'm like, nah, you don't really have to, right? Like you can just voice your opinion on your own without, replying to them, without quote tweeting them, without referencing them, because at the end of the day, that's what they want. If they see you engaging in that, it's like, that's it, they won, right? No matter what. A lot of times they're very stubborn. You're not going to change their mindset, especially some of the bad actors in our space. I'm not even going to mention it, but there were people who, during the whole meme coin phase that we went through, were just like straight up stealing from people. And I feel like people just kept giving them so much attention. And I was like, if you just mute them, block them, it's okay. The world will go on, and I just started, I'm a huge fan of the mute function, because especially as you said, the algorithms, particularly on Twitter, like if I ever, sometimes I'll be scrolling and I'm like, what's going on here? Like, why am I seeing so many negative just, and I feel it, right? Like I feel the energy almost like being drained from me. I'm like, oh, as I'm scrolling, it's like, it feels like an actual doom scroll. And then I'm like, oh, I'm in the For You tab. I'm not on my following tab. And to me, it's mind blowing, that difference. So like, why is the algorithm just feeding me this? And it's because they farm engagement, right? And like, copy pasta is a thing. Someone says one thing, and then people just like start tweeting it because they know it'll get you engagement, and then all the influencers hop on it, and it's engagement is this drug for a lot of people. And a lot of the times they'll say things that they don't even agree with themselves, or they'll put it out there even as a joke, or it'll be a totally contradictory stance to what they believe in, but they know this hot take is going to get me engagement, right? And they do it, and a lot of people think that that's the formula for success, and all power to them, but that's just not the way I operate. I kind of just tune it out, and I'm very much in my own world, and whatever I tweet, I'm like, wow, this comes from me. And of course, if I see some really good takes and things that I think are smart, I'll amplify those. But I just don't engage with a lot of the nonsense.
I think in a lot of ways, Threads, the new social media network attached to Instagram, under Meta, regardless of what anyone thinks about Meta or Instagram or whatever, I just think a new social network came around at a very interesting moment, and a moment where, it's no accident that a lot of people said it's like a breath of fresh air. It's so refreshing because it filtered for everybody all at once. It auto-filtered people to a clean slate or close, or at least back to their Instagram following, not necessarily their Twitter following. I thought that was fascinating because I think Bobby Hundreds had a really interesting post on this the other day. He wrote, I think, a Medium article on it, or an article somewhere on it. I thought there were a lot of good thoughts shared in there, but he talked about time and how time eventually turns against most social networks, or at least the ones that we've seen so far. The algorithms get gamed, all the things that we've talked about right now. And I commented back and I said, well, technically anyone, as first, this is great, fascinating article. I recommend anyone go read it. Anyone can filter at any time. Anyone, to your point, can go to the For You Only tab, but very, very few do. And I'm even raising my hand. I'm an advocate for it. I say it every now and again. I do it less frequently than I should, and sometimes fall into those spaces where you're doom scrolling and feeling all the negative energy, and then have to pull yourself out of that rabbit hole and say, whoa, 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 what's really going on here? Threads goes around and just does it for us. And you've been a huge presence on Threads thus far. I'm curious to see your commentary on that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it was just like the timing was so perfect. And I don't know if it was planned this way or if they just like had it ready and were waiting for the right moment, but it just felt, like, and again, we live in this micro bubble of a niche within a niche that is Web3. And, maybe there are sites of Twitter that are nothing like what we experience, right? I'm not saying that, but it feels like, ever since the Elon acquisition, there's kind of been a downward spiral. And then just like the last week, there was the rate limiting, and people couldn't even consume as much as they wanted to if you weren't paying, and kind of just like that forcing people to pay for a subscription-based model for, something that's been free for, however long Twitter's been around, 13 years or 14 years, however long. It felt like, the vibes were down on Twitter for sure. And then here comes a totally new product from, obviously a huge company. And, the biggest challenge for any new social media app is onboarding users, right? And I feel like, for me, that's my main thing with any new social app. It's like, well, I have this built-in audience on Instagram of, 250,000 plus people. I have this audience on Twitter that took me 13 years to build of 20,000 plus people. To go and start this all over again every single time without knowing if this is gonna like take off or not, it's exhausting, right? Like we had Blue Sky coming up, a month ago, and everyone just flooded there, and I was like, I don't know if it doesn't deserve, it doesn't merit my attention right now, because for all I know, it's not gonna last, and for what it seems, it has not lasted. But here comes Threads, which has the advantage of, having whatever Instagram and Meta has for billions of people, 2-3 billion people onboarded. You have already like an existing user base. And I think one of the most important things about it is just the simplicity of the UI, right? There's no trending right now. There's no hashtags. There are very few functions, but those things that it does really well, which is, text-based, short form text, really good quality uploads for images and video. And, something that people were against was the algorithm, because, at the beginning, most people weren't following a lot because you just made a new platform. So it was suggesting a lot of things. For me, it worked out in my favor because I actually found a ton of really amazing artists in those first days. And I think, inherently a lot of the social media apps, people just want to they just want to feel like they're seen and heard and understood, right? And if you've built this massive audience and you feel like you're getting your thoughts and emotions out, and there's this algorithm that's limiting, your output to even the people that follow you, that always feels like a bit of a slight, and I think, it's very important that Threads, whatever algorithm they put it on, it was on fire, and it's still on fire. And it feels like people are actually seeing what you put out there. So, I'm sure, and I tweeted, I'm like, I don't know how long it'll last, but, those first days of any social media app that has this much momentum, I feel like it's worth it to participate in, right? And I wrote, kind of like going back to everything we talked about, I wrote one thread, and it said, one thing that I'm always aware of is that at the end of the day, what you consume is what you become. So I take my curating very seriously, from my close relationships to the things that I read, to the things that I listen to and I watch. I consciously choose things that fill me with the energy that suits me. With any new platform, you have the power to pick how your experience will go, follow accordingly, right? And I had a lot of friends who kind of clicked the follow everyone that you follow on IG, on Threads, and immediately their experience was a mess. Because a lot of people, have been on Instagram, don't have Twitter, and they don't know, they don't know how to navigate this new type of platform. And eventually, of course, the memes take over, and the bad takes take over, and the engagement farming takes over. And for me, I didn't follow anyone. I'm just very specifically curated accounts that are like, that fill me with the things that I like, which for the most part, it's, philosophy and art and history and science. And so far for me, my Threads experience of scrolling is amazing. I'm just learning new things, I'm saving things, I'm going. So for me, it's been incredible. But, I think that goes to, to what we said, is just curating your experience on a platform. And I think people forget that it's in your power. You get to choose that. So yeah, I think the timing has been incredible. 100 million users in less than a week. I hope they keep it this simple, because I think, going to what Bobby said, I think time becomes an issue because, the platforms start off with a very clear intention of what they want to do. And then another app comes out and with another intention, and then they're like, maybe I should do that too. And they start integrating all these new features and all these new features. And then it becomes this like convoluted app where, Instagram being a perfect example, started off as just a straight up photo sharing app. Now you go on Instagram, there's stories, there's reels, stories like Snapchat, reels like TikTok. You can shop on there. There's a Shopify thing, there's a subscription newsletter type thing. And I'm like, I just want to share photos on here. It's become too much. And I feel like that's a downfall of a lot of apps, is they just start adding too many features over time. So I hope they keep Threads simple for now.
And also hand in hand with that, revenue just becomes a thing, right? Now it's just growth. Growth is their metric. Take as many users from Twitter as humanly possible and get them on Threads. And at some point in time, they're going to flip a switch, and let's see how that switch goes. But I think, at a minimum, they're of course going to do the data thing, but at a maximum, we're going to see, lots of ads and who knows what else will sort of take place at that time. But let's hope for the best.
I know for now, while it's good, we got to appreciate it while it's good and take full advantage of it. And I think for, any creator or anyone that's spending, significant time online and trying to get their art out, I think it's a worthy platform right now to experiment with.
So JN, let's tie it back to the future of art. and the digital art space, as it were, and what we're looking ahead to now. And I would love to loop in Animus and what you've done with that. Maybe give people a quick descriptor of what Animus is, and some of the things you've done recently, and then what you're hoping for, sort of how Animus is tying into the future of art.
Absolutely, yeah. So for those that don't know, Animus is an artist collective that I started in 2020 along with some of my closest friends. And our whole purpose is to onboard and educate and support artists in Web3 and beyond. We just wanted to have a community where artists just felt, you know, a sense of camaraderie and a place where they can go to and, you know, ask the tough questions and have difficult discussions and ask for help and go seek education. And you know, with that, we're all artists ourselves, so we've worked on a few different art collections, and we just want to connect, you know, good people. And you know, we do that through, you know, the community spaces that we hold, the in-person events that we host, and yeah, we just try to, you know, help artists navigate this new world. And it's been 3 years, and we just signed a collaborative deal with Arbitrum earlier this year to bring more artists onto layer twos. You know, I'm very bullish on Arbitrum and layer twos in general. I think it's the way that Ethereum scales, and they've been amazing to work with. And you know, we have a lot of really cool things planned. We hosted an event with them at Consensus. We did one at Art Basel, and we have a bunch of really cool art coming in the next few months, and hopefully we'll do something in Art Basel again this year. But it's been really fun, you know, challenging due to the market conditions. But you know, for us, any sort of feedback we get from artists saying that Animus helped them navigate Web3, or help, you know, they learned something new, or they found some emotional support, or you know, they found a collector by sharing something in our Telegram, that makes it all worth it for us.
We have some really special memories with Animus. It makes me reflect in a moment like this. But even going back to 2021, I met some really special people through Animus. And I remember in the earliest days of Artifacts, you know, talking to you about the concept, understanding at that time what Animus was, and through it, really, I remember Dave Krugman. That was really where our relationship started, and Maria Sutherland, and Ill Concept, who was photographing in New York on the night of the Artifacts takeover. Fun to reflect on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been so many connections that started, you know, from our community. And to me, it just brings me so much joy. And we just want to continue that, right? And it's been a little more challenging because obviously I feel like people are a lot more involved, and, you know, there's been a bit of a burnout and people kind of like stepping away during these market conditions. But, you know, I'm certain that, you know, once the conditions change and you know, we onboard more people, we'll get going again. And for us, I mean, every time we host the in-person events are by far my favorite. There's just such a deeper level of connection there, and you know, we curate art, and it's really amazing to just, you know, get to put on a lot of artists that may be overlooked, right? And give them a platform to do something cool, right? For Consensus, we made the first Animus mural in Austin, in collaboration with A.L. Grime, who's like an amazing artist. And she, you know, designed this really amazing mural that's up in Austin. We did a whole merch thing. I'm actually wearing the shirt right now.
Let's go.
The alley shirt design. And, you know, she's incredible, first of all, but she, you know, constantly told us how much it meant to her that, you know, we gave her a platform to do this in front of all her peers, because, you know, I feel like the space, for better or worse, you know, there's this subset of power collectors who do have a lot of say as to which artists get put on the pedestal, right? And if we as Animus can kind of shine a light on the more emerging, you know, overlooked creators who we feel deserve it, then that's a huge positive for us.
The Animus hat is still the hat I think I wear the most. I've destroyed it, absolutely destroyed it.
Amazing. I love it. I love that you have one. We still haven't sold those. Those are still very early OG, and we only gave them away. So that one's special.
So no matter how damaged it gets, I can never part with it.
Yeah, that's V1.
Nice. So do the same thing, but on behalf of Animus now. I asked you about your legacy. Take a step back with Animus, go at arm's length, kind of turn yourself around and look at the brand and what it's become now onboarding a lot of artists, giving shine to a lot of overlooked artists, the mural, the merch, all sorts of the things that you've done. And fast forward a little bit, what's a bucket list item for Animus, and what do you want that legacy to continue to progress towards?
That's a great question. I think bucket list for us would be having either a gallery or just like co-creative spaces. You hear of periods of time. For me, one of the biggest kind of like eye-opening moments in my life was I was reading this book in my American philosophy class called The Metaphysical Club. And the Metaphysical Club was this club that was formed in the mid to late 1800s, I believe in Boston. And it was William James, one of the best American philosophers, or most prominent at least, and Charles Sanders Peirce and a bunch of others. And they just formed this group where people went to meet and talk philosophy, once every few weeks. And something as simple as that just absolutely propelled American philosophy and the quality of thought just exponentially, right? And I learned about that in college, and I was like, oh, okay, you get a lot of really smart, creative people together, in the same space to share ideas, and that's when like magic happens. And then you hear of like, in the late 60s and 70s, where all of the, movie directors that we consider now legendary, Francis Ford Coppola, and Spielberg, and who directed Star Wars? I'm not in the brain for it. George Lucas, and all of them were all hanging out, and you see videos of them just like playing pool, and I'm like, wait, what? And they all, when you talk to, or you hear them talk about it, they say, yeah, that was the most explosive period because we were just like starting out and we were just sharing ideas. And then you think of places like the Factory in New York, right, where all of these artists were getting together, and it was such an explosion of art in that time. And that is my mind frame for Animus, right? If we can create these spaces where creatives can get together and share ideas and just talk through what they're thinking, right? I think it'll create connections that will lead to explosions, of art of the digital kind or traditional kind. And so far we've seen that, right? We've seen that through a lot of the in-person events that we've hosted, through a lot of the spaces, through a lot of the people that I've met. So bucket list for me would be having, more IRL locations where we can do that, having like a co-creative space where, if you want to come do a photo shoot, come do a photo shoot. If you want to, get some canvas and play around with paint, you can do that. If you want a podcast studio where you can record out of, you can do that, and then you want to come have coffee and read some books and chat with other creatives, you can do that. So that would be a bucket list goal. And, of course, it would have like a kind of like a gallery component attached. And, we would kind of become curators in a sense and be able to put on, artists who are overlooked. But that's like absolute, high level bucket list stuff. But for us, I feel like, so far we've done a really good job at, doing what we do, which is support artists and make connections between people that might have not met before. And as long as we continue to do that and help progress the space forward in one way or another, then our job is done.
Here's a controversial question. Where would you base the collaborative space and gallery?
I mean, just for practical reasons, we would be looking into Miami, just because it's active on all times of the year. It's a little bit quieter. Cost-wise, it's more efficient than any of the other hubs. And the emerging art scene here is really, really insane. There's a lot of really cool artists. So I think it would be something that, we could really foster and grow, and obviously get a larger space than we would, Of course, I would love to say New York, but just cost-wise, we would have to make a lot of money to get that sort of big space in New York City.
Well, I hope it happens in both locations. I really enjoy that goal, that legacy-oriented goal of looking back at some of the historical examples of idea and art explosion, and how having the right set of people brought together under specific circumstances can sometimes create that And I don't know, I just find that to be a very interesting compass. And so it's no surprise that Animus has the vibes, on Telegram and beyond.
Thank you. Yeah, no, vibes are first and foremost. If the vibes are off, then nothing flows.
Speaking of vibes, art, you are a collector of art as well. Just today,
Absolutely.
just
Mhm.
today, sitting here, not to the exclusion of anyone, but just first artwork that comes to mind that you've collected, can be as recently or as far back as you want, but something that vibes with you right here, right now.
If I thought about it, I got to go with our friend Chewy Stoll. He's I say it all the time, but he is truly one of my favorites. I'm a huge fan of surrealism, and when I see his work, I feel so much. Um, and I'm trying to look for the name of it, but I have one of the, to me, it's one of my grails, and I want to say it's. I'll get you the name right now. You're the cure. You're the pain. That is a huge grail piece for me, and one of my favorites that I've collected. So I'm going with Chewy Stoll. You're the cure. You're the pain.
I like that reference so much because I can't remember whether that piece is part of this collection or not, but I know for a fact that when Chewy had done, it was a collection of either 10 or 20 artworks, and they were all one of ones. Like Animus was rolling hard in that collection, as was I. And we all sort of met in the middle there. We're talking a little bit about it on
Yeah,
chat. And that was a very, very fun moment.
yeah, that was that collection for sure.
Yeah.
I was going to bat that day. I was like, I need one of these. I need to Chewy 101. So yeah, that was really special for me. It's up on the screen if it comes up. We'll see if it does.
Let's go. Yeah, big fan of Chewy Stoll. Call him very loosely speaking and lovingly speaking, the Dolly of digital art. Just goes, just a way to frame the surrealism.
Oh yeah, no, I think about it all the time. I'm like, I need to download Cinema 4D or Unreal to experiment, and it immediately my mind goes to, I want to make stuff that makes me feel like Chewy's art makes me feel.
Do you recall an artwork? It's a collaborative piece between Chewy Stoll and Defaced.
I don't think I've seen that.
It's like this sleeper artwork. It's a one of one. It's called Star Dad. It was when Defaced was debuting like Star Maker and kind of teasing what he was going to be doing over there. But it's a super rare artwork. And yeah, I will never forget. It was right at the beginning of when Chewy was sort of launching into this, I guess what we currently call his surrealism style, right? Right at the beginning of that. I'll never forget that artwork.
Wow, you gotta send me a link to that. I want to see it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a pain point. I think it's one of those artworks you finish second to, but it's all part of the story. It's all part of the story.
100%. Always happens. Those always exist.
Cast your eyes out. The future of art. Talk about a few things on your mind. It could be relative to the present, what you feel like needs to happen out there. And actually, I'll lead into two questions I love to ask at the end, but I think we can bake those into this discussion. The two questions that I ask at the end are one, what do you expect to happen? Just concretely, like you would sit here today on the future of art and say, I expect this to happen, look for it, boom. And then the other side of the coin is, I don't necessarily expect this thing to happen, but damn it, I really hope it does. Something that you hope for in the future of what we're experiencing.
Okay, I think what I think will happen is that there's still going to be this kind of like public opposition to NFTs for a while, right? I feel like from the very beginning, there was a lot of, negativity in the popular sphere about NFTs and it being a hype cycle. And then of course, with everything that happened in the crypto markets, and there's still a ton of negativity and opposition to crypto itself. And I think that's going to continue for a while. I think we are in an extremely niche industry, right? And it's much smaller than we imagined. And I think it's going to continue to be that way for at least a few years. But I think, those that stick around and put the work in and continue to, improve their craft and show up and, act out of goodwill with good intentions, I think those people will truly, really lead this digital art revolution that I think will eventually come as blockchain technology gets integrated into everything we do, right? I think people don't realize just, once the regulatory nonsense goes away, and once you get, legit companies that do the work and advance the technology and make it easier, and once, the blockchain component becomes the back end, and once you're transacting on the blockchain without knowing that you're doing it, I think that's when the importance of what we're building will truly shine. And that's when the people that, again, stick around and build and progress, I think that's when they'll get the recognition they deserve. But I don't think it's going to happen for a while, right? I think this idea of like, oh yeah, when mass adoption comes, mass adoption, I think that mass adoption on that scale is probably at least 5 years out.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And I guess I'm going to say, I don't know. I don't disagree with your time scale at all. I think it's going to take time. I think we would all probably hope that some form of, not necessarily mass adoption, but some form of more significant adoption would happen a little bit sooner than that. But I could see it being that. I could see it being a little bit longer than that, right? Like who actually knows right now? But one thing, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. One thing that's never changed for me personally, and admittedly, it took me, I'm in my late 30s. I feel like I'm in an interesting generation where I can still grasp digital ownership. Sort of grew up with the internet. It wasn't obvious to me, but I grasped it pretty swiftly after I started to focus on it. Today, I can sit here and say it's stone cold obvious to me. Of course, a digital art creator or digital photographer or anyone who's native to digital, of course, there must be a way for a collector to own that artwork. And I don't care if you can right-click save as it. And I think that's the mainstream hurdle. It's one of the many mainstream hurdles. But quite frankly, not only do I not care, but I think there's a equally or more a stronger case that can be made that it actually improves the provenance and improves the original owning power of the artwork itself from an artist perspective and from a collector perspective. How do you feel? Do you feel the same as me? I guess let me start there.
Yeah, no, I 100% absolutely agree. And I think for sure it's a hurdle. And I feel like the younger generation just immediately understands, right? I grew up playing video games, and that's why I immediately got it, because digital ownership, quote unquote, in video games was so big for me, and transacting, digital items in these fiction universes was always like a big deal to me. And when you add the technology that blockchain brings and being able to transact these anywhere in the world, pretty much instantaneously over a few minutes or seconds, it's an absolute game changer. And I think one of the hurdles is kind of getting the older generations to understand, but eventually that in itself will become irrelevant, right? They'll just kind of like have to adapt in one way or another. But also I think, for me, one of the biggest game changers in kind of the way I frame it and see it is just getting displays up in my house, right? Just getting physical displays where I'm showing the art that I own. And it immediately changes almost anyone's perspective once they come here, right? They visit my house and they see this like amazing slideshow of art, and they have so many questions. And oh, what's this? And what's that one? And where did this one come from? And I'm like, well, this is from a photographer in India, and I was able to buy his work, that I would have never otherwise seen. And he took it at a, holy festival over there. And, this is a surrealist piece by this artist who I follow, who's like absolutely incredible. And this one was like a really crappy PFP project that absolutely rugged me, but it was really funny. So I put it up, and I have all these stories to go with all of the digital art that I own. And immediately, everyone that sees them just gets so much, and they're like, oh, okay, I didn't even think that you can display them. And it's something as simple as that. A lot of people are like, okay, what do you do with something you own? You just have it on your phone? And I'm like, no, eventually, technology is going to keep getting better and better, especially for displaying them, right? You have the Apple Vision Quest Pro thing coming out next year. There's just going to be more and more technologically advanced ways to display the things that you own. And every day we're spending more and more time living in these digital realms, right? So it would only make sense that digital ownership just becomes bigger and bigger. And the hurdles right now are the ease of use and kind of like safety. There's rampant hacking and a lot of really fishy things going on. But once those things get patched up, it'll get much better. It's kind of, again, comparing it to the early days of the internet, where it was just like the wild west. And the internet in the early era was just like a wild place. I don't think the younger generation realizes. I saw things at 13 and 14 that no child should ever see online.
Nothing's changed.
Yeah.
Nothing's
Yeah.
changed. It's only gone maybe even further down that road with the rise of socials and all sorts of stuff. But it's interesting to reflect on. I like that you went the display route. And I think there's really two angles to it. And I think they'll ultimately meet in the middle and they'll all just be both commonly accepted. But one way to think about it is via the frames on your wall. And another way to think about it is in the various forms of digital / augmented reality / extended reality formats. And, again, ultimately, these things all kind of meet in the middle. But both of them can significantly advance, how I format a custom gallery right now on Cyber and Spatial and Hyperfy and all these different places. I mean, that's just going to leaps and bounds mold and morph into more of what we see in high fidelity Unreal Engine 5. Like all that stuff will end up going to the highest common denominator when it comes to visual, and that'll be madness. And then all of a sudden, when the hardware tech behind the Apple headset is improving at a rapid pace, like all that's just going to get to a nonsensical place. And then from the hardware perspective, behind you, your frames on your wall, a true mass adoption, not even the beyond significant adoption, worldwide adoption, is when a home designer doesn't think to get a mid-tier couple $100 art piece on their to put on the living room wall, to stage a model home, to buy a home and design it themselves, when all they're thinking about is, of course, I would get the cost-effective digital frame that is completely seamless and gives me some form of an art subscription, or that I have now multiple pieces that I can change for the occasion, or maybe they're changed for me based on some parameters that I'm able to put in. When that happens, it's just game over for digital art.
Yeah, absolutely. We need a mood ring for NFTs. You put on the mood ring, measures your temperature. You're feeling sad, it gives you maybe some somber NFTs or some happy ones. You're feeling, it matches your mood. But no, I totally agree. I think people are underestimating how fast the technology would advance, and it's always the first adopters, right? That's one of my mantras is first adopters have a very different rate of growth, and then it's like incredible. It really pays off to be the first adopter of any technology that takes off, and you'll fail 9 times out of 10 and that technology won't take off, but the one that does will change your life if you're early enough.
Facts. And to go along with what you're saying, I mean, we could sit here and brainstorm all day, but I even you said mood ring. I love that so much. It ties to exactly how you're feeling in the moment. Another thing we've seen some light experimentation on is weather. I think Transient's done a fantastic job of that. And Josh Pierce had the art piece Impermanence that matches to your local weather in his art, and has some fun Easter eggs in there when specific weather oriented milestones happen. That stuff's so fun. I mean, sit inside and look at an art piece and it's raining outside, and either it gives you the flip emotion inside, maybe it makes your world sunny inside when you're experiencing a dreary day, or the reverse, or some nuance to that. All this stuff is so fun to think about.
Yeah, no, I think we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of dynamic NFTs yet. And shout out Transient Labs, because they're really pushing the envelope forward. And I'm seeing a lot of great experimentation. They have their new the doppelganger contract that looks really incredible. And I think once a lot of those tools are more democratized, and we'll see even more innovation. And again, imagine coming into this space to digital art, after having shunning it for a few years, and then you come in, 4 or 5 years down the line, and you're like, oh yeah, I want to mint an NFT, and then you have all these people that have been in the space for 5 years, and they're doing doppelganger contracts that are dynamically linked to, the stock market or the weather or the mood or your emotions or your brain scans, or it's gonna be it won't be an even playing field. So I hope more artists recognize that and at least learn about what's going on here.
Agreed. Agreed. And some people have said it, but whatever needs to be done in the current circumstances, it's you may not be able to spend all of your time here, but maintaining that type of a presence and contributing in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, it's a big. I agree with you, man. That's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. It's finding a way to stay at least semi-consistent and be around, because when this thing tips, if we're right and what we feel is obvious actually happens, if you have a multi-year or 5+ year, depending, 5+ year track record at that point in time, it's probably going to benefit you pretty substantially.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's a risk worth taking right now.
Jay and Silva, who should be on the future of art if you had to name one person off the top of your mind?
Rio, always Rio. I just shouted him out last time, and I will shout him out again. That he thinks so far ahead. He's one of those that I'm just like, you're thinking 5 years ahead, and it's almost working to your detriment because people just don't know what you're building yet. The stuff he's doing with AI, these movie trailers that he's scoring himself. Like I could see him writing, filming, directing, producing his own full feature AI film within the next year, scoring it, just like truly one man band man. And I'm always just so much in awe of the stuff he puts out, and I'm always like, how is this not getting more recognition? It blows my mind.
Well, it's all these people that are so humble. Rio's so humble. He's one of my favorite people as well. He's so humble. You are too. You carry yourself with a lot of humility, and that's a phenomenon that I think some of it gets solved with time, right? The fact that you carry yourself with an air of humility, that Rio does the same. And we talked about influencers who are the opposite of that, and sometimes maybe not here for all the right reasons and the loudest voices in the room, and we all experience that. A lot of that does change over time. Whereas I think those who carry themselves with humility, like yourself, like Rio, but keep going and keep contributing and keep onboarding and keep creating insane art, diverse art, like, at some point that recognition does come.
Yeah, absolutely. You just need that one that breaks through, and then people kind of go back and they're like, oh, whoa. They see the consistency, and they see the discipline and the resolve. And, I feel like people find me and they go through my work, and then the more they dig further back, they're like, oh whoa, this guy's been doing a lot for a long time, quietly. I've been just because again, I do it because it's the things that interest me, and I do it for myself. And I'm just not a very showy person by design. I've always been very introverted, so I make my art, I put it out there, and I don't make a big fuss of it. I should get better at it. I always think about that Tyler the Creator video where he's just like, you have to promote your stuff over and over and over again, and it doesn't matter. And that's something that for sure I need, to improve, because I'll make my stuff and it could be a huge project, and I'll just kind of like put it out there, and okay, well, and I'll go on to making the next one. Eventually you may find it, but I just make stuff for myself.
Well, would highly recommend, checking your stuff out. One thing I want to ask you is, let's send some people, if they're unaware with the artwork that you do have out, let's send them to some very specific places. And why don't you start, and then I'll try to fill in any gaps.
Absolutely. So the one thing that has been minting for a while now that I'm probably the proudest of, that that I'm a part of, is the Buscando America project. We are trying to fundraise to make a full independent, full-length fiction film down in Colombia, in Medellin. It'll be this kind of like magical realism film. We have a teaser for it. We went down there for a month and shot, this documentary style photography projects all over the city. We made a documentary about it. There's a 20-minute documentary on YouTube about it. And that collection is still minting on OpenSea. If you just put Buscando America, it's all over my profile as well. And, it's 2,500 one-of-one photos, each at 0.04 ETH. So not expensive at all. And they're all one-of-ones between myself and the other two directors. And yeah, it's still minting. You know, it's one of those things we figured it would be a slow mint, but I'm just so proud of the project. I don't know, a bunch have come up in both my screens. They look so good when you have them displayed on the screens. And you know, I think again, film I think is one of those industries that'll be absolutely disrupted, you know, whenever we get there. But right now it's a niche within a niche, right? And for us, it's a niche within a niche within a niche because we're Spanish speaking creators making an independent film in Web3. You know, it narrows down our user base by a lot. But you know, if I could urge people to even just go see the documentary on YouTube, you don't have to buy the NFTs. Of course, I would love if you did, but just watch the documentary and everything will make sense. Everyone that watches it, you know, kind of sees the vision of what we're building. And again, it's a very long-term project. It's probably the longest span of a project that, you know, it's going to be a 2-year thing that we're working on, which in Web3 is like an insane amount of time. But I'm super proud, and it's minting and it's affordable. So go get you some Buscando America NFTs.
Let's go. So that's number one. But now go through your own legacy prior to Buscando.
Let's see. Personally, what do I have? Oh, I have my very first piece on Super Rare is still up. Oro Mari Sangre is a very politically charged piece that means it's one of my favorite things that I've ever made. Speaking about the situation in Venezuela and you know, kind of our search and hope for just freedom, economic freedom and democracy in Venezuela. And it's a very powerful, in my opinion, photograph, and it's my Super Rare Genesis. It's out there. I should probably open up for just like any open bid. So I'm donating 100% of the proceeds to different charities that deal with immigrant issues here in the US. So, you know, I just want that so that I'm able to give it away, really. And besides that, what else do I have out there? I don't have much else that's unsold, but I have a lot of stuff coming up. I have a new collection that I've been working on forever. And it's all these photos from Greece. I've talked about it a bunch, but the project keeps evolving behind the scenes because new things keep coming out. And now I'm thinking I kind of want to do a doppelganger contract for it. So I got to talk to Transient about it. And then over the last few weeks, I've been building this generative fractal project. So far, it's at a 3,000 piece generative fractal project. Have I shown you a preview of that, by the way?
You've talked about it a little bit. I haven't seen a preview.
Ooh, I gotta send you the preview. I think you really like it. I think that's gonna be really cool because again, it'll be a larger collection that is all totally, you know, one of one, unique, and it's all fractals. So I'm really excited about that. But yeah, that's what I have out there.
Amazing. I'm so excited that fractals have become a bigger and bigger part of what you're doing in the present moment. And I remember when you were beginning your exploration of them, seeing some of the earliest visuals, and then obviously when you were entering Super Rare, and just again seeing you take fractals and become like go further and further down that rabbit hole. I can't wait to see what you come up with.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's so interesting to me. And the more I study just consciousness and spirituality and mathematics and science, and, you know, the more and more I see the connection to, you know, the mathematics, the fractal mathematics of everything, right? From, you know, the stars and the cosmos and the galaxy down to your neurons, down to plants. Like my best friend just grew some sunflowers and it was just like straight fractals. And I'm like, it's literally everywhere. It's everywhere in nature. So I really love exploring it and you know, experimenting and learning new things. Because I think it brings me such a sense of peace. And I don't know if it's like just optically because I'm staring at the math of the universe. It just brings me like, I don't know, I can't describe how peaceful it is for me to just sit here. And that's why I can do it all day. And also I enjoy that it's, you know, something that you don't really see too much of. Obviously, there are some incredible fractal artists out there all over, but it's still a very small subset of people, you know, compared to say 3D artists or illustrators or, you know, so I feel like, oh yeah, this is something that's kind of like, it goes with everything that I know and have learned and I'm into, but it's also kind of a niche, again, that, you know, something that I could make my own in a way.
Can't wait to see it, man. We're here for it. So I love recording episodes. I mean, I could say this about a lot of people, but I'm just sitting here reflecting on it in reference to solely you. It's so fun recording an episode with someone who I think personally like personifies the future of art, and is someone who's molding it, who's crafting it, and doing so not just on behalf of yourself, but like we talked about before, for so many others. And that's been proven out across many Telegram chats and far beyond. So just in general, man, appreciate what you are giving of self to the construction of what this very wet ball of clay looks like.
Thank you so much. No, it really means a lot. And, I really do try to navigate it with the best intentions in mind. And, I want this space to progress, and just digital art to progress and help people. And, if I can add my little grain of sand to this, hopefully incredible castle that we build, I'll be very happy. And yeah, I'm honored to have been here. It's always great to chat. So thank you for having me.
We had the one-on-one. We did it.
We did it.
We did
Amazing.
it.
I'm proud of us.
Let's go onward, man. So everyone, go follow J.N. Silva. Go follow J.N. Silva on Threads. The energy you're bringing on Threads is exceptional. So please get in on it. Get in on it while it's there and before Threads changes. So inject some J.N. straight into your veins. So hey, appreciate you, man. Onward to the future, and talk to you soon.
Let's go. Thank you for having me. And yeah, spiral out.
Thank you for listening and for being part of the future of art. If you liked what you heard, please do subscribe and drop a review on your favorite podcast platform. Onward to the many interviews that await us. The Future of Art is produced by Artifex. Artifex, Artifex, was created to honor today's top digital fine artists in 3 dimensions. Each artist's one-of-one work of art becomes a collectible 3D sculpture and centerpiece of an immersive world built in Unreal Engine, the creation tool of Epic Games. Visit @artifex_project on Instagram to experience those sculptures in AR, and visit artifex.art/unreal to literally step inside the art on your browser.